Check, check. Can you hear me? At home? Yes, okay, great. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to those I haven't met before. Before I get started, one of the things I want to say is that I am interested very much in your feedback about the format of Wednesday night, things that you would like to see happen, themes you would like to hear addressed, brought into the Dharma. And one of the things I wonder about is if sometimes it might be more desirable just to have open discussion rather than me spend the majority of this period. Do I lecture? Do I talk at you? Giving a talk? Yeah. So please don't hesitate to share your thoughts. Otherwise, I'll just continue doing what I'm doing. Maybe that's not the best thing. So, I'm continuing with the Thinking Zen series. Last week, I brought up this issue, which is that we can train our minds in meditation and develop the capacity to be in non-conceptual experience to varying degrees, experience transcendent states, even have transparency of self, all of the jewel verifications of the Dharma. And still, when we begin operating and using our minds, they default to an ordinary mode that is not informed by anything other than the usual dualistic vision of reality. In other words, we get off the cushion and we return to ordinary mind. Suzuki Roshi said something like, you all are these perfect Buddhas as you sit in the zendo, and then you open your mouths. Something like that. But this is actually a real issue, and I think that many people practice for a while and encounter this gap between how their minds function in their ordinary life and what they know to be true from the cushion. And more practice on the cushion may eventually just change the way the mind operates, or it may not. It may not. So Thinking Zen is me talking about different places of training the mind or untraining the mind in order for it to accord with Dharma. In other words, in order for it to accord with what we witness for ourselves in the condition of meditation. So today, I want to talk about, the theme is, the symbol is not the actuality ever. And how our minds are largely in relationship to symbols. And so that's what I'm going to try to explicate. So today is Juneteenth. It commemorates, celebrates the abolition of slavery, 1865. It's not even 200 years ago. It's barely 150 years ago. It's a sobering thing for me to reflect on. The official abolition of slavery, and then, as many people know, there was Reconstruction, and then Jim Crow, and then we had the Civil Rights Movement, and to what degree has the mind state that undergirded slavery actually been reduced? People have different opinions about that. And it probably largely depends on your intersection, how much you feel like the beliefs that undergirded slavery actually have been changed We could say things are very different. We could say that racism has only mutated, as many would say. We could say things are different and better. We could say we're not there yet. Definitely continued work of love and wisdom needed to root out deluded ideas and desensitized hearts, to make that actual. And for me, it's important to support things like reparations, prison reform, things that impact African Americans disproportionately, culture of police, and so forth. So there's a kind of paradox of this holiday that's celebrating the end of slavery and the reality of what the situation still is. Now, the theme of the talk specifically is the symbol is not the actuality ever. And let's think about racism. Racism in all its forms reduces people to symbols. One way to understand how slavery was justified and how it was carried out was that a dehumanized symbol of Africans was created, emerged. I don't know, you think that there's like a room of people in a room of people deciding they're going to come up with some diabolical, evil idea. I don't know that it works like that. But a dehumanizing symbol of Africans emerged, and therefore, because this is not a person, this is the dehumanized symbol that I see, the whole thing was legitimized. It went largely unchallenged for a very, very, very long time. Our country was built on that symbol going unchallenged. So what do I mean by this symbol? Now, this is true with people, groups, but it's also true with a cup of tea and a plant and a current feeling you may be having. The mind works through, let's call it false symbol or flattened symbol. So I have a symbol of tea in my mind, or a person in my mind, and the encounter triggers my particular symbol that lives in my mind, but what happens is the actual phenomena before me is not being related to, but the referent is. Or to some degree, I'm more or less, relating to the actuality in front of me and the symbol at the same time. So I don't encounter the presence. So we don't see or encounter or actually have contact with relationship. Often, we're relating to our preconceptions. Right? This is almost cliche. So a person or a group is flattened, is monochromized. I kind of made up a word. Monochromized. And what's the consequence of that? What becomes possible when people are reduced to symbols? In other words, what becomes possible when we're not in relationship? There's too many things we could name that become possible when we're not in relationship. Israel, Gaza. There's a factor in that. Two peoples who see each other to more or less degree as a symbol often. Relationship, actual relationship and communication, rare, now unfortunately getting rarer, because it's very hard for human beings not to be in relationship to their symbols. Yeah, we can just make it very personal and think about somebody who registers in your mind as like enemy or adversary or problem person. And when we think of that person, we are not encountering that person in our thinking. We are encountering a symbol. But do we know that we're doing that? Do we know that that image, thought, plus whatever feeling it evokes, do we know that that's a symbol and not an actuality? It sounds kind of crazy now to even have to state this, but we often don't. So the worst in us knows how to manipulate this aspect of mind. Right? We can, for example, gossip about somebody, and we have the power to shape a symbol in someone else's mind that they will relate to instead of the person we're gossiping about. That's how, prominent this is in the way that we think if we don't train. Dogen Zenji has a phrase about the state of mind of Dharma, where Dogen says, when one side is realized, the other side is dark. Now, on one level, this is talking about the ultimate and the conventional. In your meditation, when you're realizing the ultimate, there is no self. There is just this sheer openness. It's dark to you. In other words, it's hidden. It is not illuminated. And then, let's say you slide out of that state into being a personality, that ultimate truth then becomes dark. The other, it flips around. When one side is realized, let's say in this case the personality, the ultimate becomes obscured. But thinking of it more broadly, Dharma is a kind of perspectivism. In other words, it's saying that we only get to see an experience in accord with where we are looking from. And therefore, no moment of perception can ever be total, because everything can be looked at from a different angle. It's tricky because what we don't see for us in any moment doesn't exist. So the person or the thing that we flatten and we say, they're great. Meanwhile, they're at home kicking their cat. We don't have access to that information. Because of that, our saying they're great in that moment, is that true? Maybe it's true in that moment. Is it ultimately true? All we ever have is the perspective that we look from. When one side is realized, another side is dark. There's a rock garden, Zen rock garden in Kyoto at the monastery of Ryoanji. If you ever go to Japan and you like temples, this rock garden is very beautiful. And the brilliance of the design is that it was designed so that no matter where you sit, you can't see every stone. Right, it's like I think such a direct teaching. You can't take in the whole picture from any one point. There is no point that can take in the whole picture. And maybe you could say because of that, we snapshot. We do flatten things to symbols, so they're manageable. Like last week, I was talking about the first point of thinking Zen was monocausality is false. It's very difficult for our minds to encompass that there are so many factors in anything happening that out of convenience, habit, laziness, no choice, lack of practice, we tend to think, this is happening, it's because of this. And if that was true, that would be fine, but it's never true that something has one cause. And so we miss the whole picture. Right? This is similar. To phrase this positively, to actually encounter life more and more directly, more and more immediate, would be to come more alive. To be in more and more direct relationship with everything. I'm, centering our socio-political life because its consequences are so grave, but also you could say the environment. The environment is the same thing. Nature is a symbol. Think about it. People have nature on their t-shirts. Maybe some of you do right now. No offense. I see the sun and the moon. Even nature is a symbol for us. It's like a backdrop for our human affairs. It's a symbol of what makes me feel good. Right? I remember a couple of years ago, I saw a cloud for the first time. It was a really impactful experience. I'm not sure how else to say it, but I looked up, and whatever we are pointing to when we say cloud, I encountered it without the filter, and it was quite... Whatever I say makes a symbol of the experience, right? So, some teachings say things like, I think I mentioned this in regard to monocausality, some teachings say things like, everything you think is delusion, all thought is delusion. That might be something to explore your own experience of that. That would mean that you are observing the mind as something that often is not telling you the truth or is not giving you an accurate picture of reality. Maybe a softer way to take it is to say whatever we think is incomplete. Whenever we think of a person, place, a thing, a feeling, it's an incomplete symbol. I was starting to think of where do symbols come from? The symbols that you have of, let's say, if you did connect with the enemy or the adversary, where did that arise from? On one hand, it arises from our experience. We make our symbols out of some experience. But the experience could be what we heard about a person, a place, a thing, a feeling. Like anger is an interesting one. Many people have heard that anger is very scary. And so they mostly relate to the symbol of their anger, not the actuality. The actuality, the symbol is so frightening that the actual experience, one is only partially in it. We heard that it wasn't okay to be anger. I meant to say be angry, but that's interesting, to be anger. That's Zen, to be anger. We have our experience, which is always just one facet, and then we have a memory of that experience of one facet, and that becomes a symbol. You see how it's removed by a number of steps from... We have an experience or hearsay about an experience. We have a memory of that hearsay. We relate to our own memory. All of these are shaping the symbol. Our symbols are shaped by the perspectives on people, places, or things that culture centers and celebrates. Right? So we sometimes talk about that as fixed beliefs in Dharma, that we are colonized with fixed beliefs that will continue to live in us unless we bring introspection to them, unless we shine a light of curiosity. Is this true on them? Right? Part of our symbol is shaped by what we haven't experienced. It's a lack of exposure. It's a lack of relationship that shapes the symbols we have as much as the actual relationship we have. How much are we aware of this happening? There was a student at the monastery years ago who he had come for summer program, and he was finishing up a PhD at Reed College, and he was interested in whether non-symbolic consciousness was really possible. Okay. So what I'm talking about, some people doubt and say, no way, it's not. You can, all experience is filtered through language and symbol, through culture. That in some ways is a crude summation of the insights of the postmodern thinkers. There is no pure experience. Everything is mediated. But meditators have always said, no, you're wrong. There is such a thing as unmediated experience. There is such a thing as a pure experience. So I got to have this EEG on me, and it was really cool because they put this like slimy gel things, and there's all these nodes, and you wear this funny cap. And what they did is they flashed pictures of famous people, including politicians that everybody knows. And they were testing to see if I could not have any thought or reaction or concept in reaction to what was flashed. And they're measuring, they have the correlates in the brain that they associate with when you have a thought. So I did my best to not have any thoughts when I saw, Trump and Obama and Vanna White and whoever else they flashed. They would flash them really quick, and you're just looking. The problem with the story is I don't know if I passed the test or not, because I never got the data. I asked him about the data, and I got a kind of vague answer. He's like, well, it's kind of inconclusive whether. My sense was I could. But that could be my own symbol of my own capacity, right? To be careful. Better to say, and this is another thing Jogen said is, there are those who are deluded within delusion. In other words, there are those who, through encountering their own symbol-making process and its overt craziness enough, take on a certain flavor of humility in their lives and begin to second-guess their own snap judgments about things. I think in spiritual circles we hear a lot about people with a desire to be connected. Some people, I asked earlier today to connect with why you're meditating, and somebody I could guess might have thought, I really want to feel a sense of connectedness. It is living through the mediation of symbols that might be why we feel disconnected. Right? Symbols of the other can prevent or discourage relationship. They could make us curious. Right? What's his name? The blues musician, African-American blues musician, Daryl. Do you know who I'm talking about? This guy's name is Daryl. And Daryl thought it would be interesting. Racism blew his mind that people could have such, especially like Ku Klux Klan members. I believe Daryl grew up in the South. And he just was so painfully floored by how somebody could not know him and decide they hate him. And his response to that was to make friends with members of the Ku Klux Klan, to seek out relationships with them, to have tea and coffee, and have them be in relationship to see what happened to their symbol. And it's mostly a very positive story because there are Daryl, and I'm sorry I don't remember his last name. He's a really inspiring guy. He has a collection of KKK hoods that he keeps to show people that relationship can change people. In his mind, that people who are deeply, overtly racist can be reformed because they met Daryl, and Daryl's a great guy, and they said, wait, I was wrong all along. The relationship caused the symbol to be purged to some degree. There's a great documentary about Daryl, so he'll pop up. Google will show him to you pretty easily. If we want to work with our own symbol making, especially if we have a symbol that we see causes suffering, Just some things I could say about my own work with that. One is the more we think such and such is, the more we body the symbol. Some of the symbols that live in our minds are a little bit like a nest that is aggregated piece by piece. And the more we think the thought, the thicker and more embedded the symbol becomes in us. I think this is part of why many of us feel that the hope lies with children. I remember at one point I was not having a great time being a monastic, and I was talking to a friend about becoming a Montessori teacher, because I was thinking, well, the best thing you could do if you want to save all beings is start with minds that have less fixed symbols. Maybe that's true. So we stop feeding the symbol. We also can deconstruct it. Now, one way of deconstructing a symbol is relationship. Right? But some people have a negative symbol or a positive symbol can be problematic. I'm not highlighting that. Some people have a symbol of an other and they don't actually have the ability to be in relationship with one of those people. That's part of the problem, right? How do we dehumanize people? We segregate neighborhoods. We make firm borders. Because if we're in too much proximity, our symbols will tend to fray. We don't always have the ability to make that kind of contact. So another way is to educate ourselves. Right? This is Dharma work too, to read books from the perspective of people that is outside the intersection we occupy. Right? It's the side that is dark. It's a way to realize it. It's a way to create empathy. And if we demonize such and such a people in such and such a place, to understand their experience is compassion. So we're not helpless with this. The ideal of the tradition, and of course it's a high ideal. The ideal is to live in naked experience as much as possible. To be someone who encounters life not through the filter of the mind. And we can inspire to that, and we can train to that, and that's what we're doing in Zazen. And this is a symbol-making machine, so it's good to come at it from both angles.